boy stood at the edge of the dusty auction yard, hands buried in the pockets of his faded denim jacket. Dust coated his boots, clung to his jeans, and settled in the curls of his unkempt dark hair. At 15, Caleb was small, wiry but tough, with a quiet intensity in his eyes that unsettled adults and marked him as different from the other boys in town. He wasn't there to buy a horse, that much was clear. No trailer, no adult, just a wad of bills bound by a rubber band. Yet he stood firm, shoulders back, chin raised, blending in with the weathered men in cowboy hats and oil-stained jeans, men who carried losses they never spoke of. The auctioneer's voice cut through the dry air, sharp as a whip, as horses were led through the gate paraded like goods. Some were sleek, obedient, with steady gaits and empty eyes. Others fought the ropes, wildness still burning in their bones. Then came the horse. The gate rattled as a black Mustang cross burst through, a storm of muscle and fire. His mane was tangled with burrs, his eyes wide with fury and fear. A heavy rope dug into his neck, but he tossed his head as if it were nothing. The handler cursed, heels skidding in the dirt, barely holding on. The yard fell silent. Even the auctioneer paused. "Untamable," someone muttered. "Broke a man's arm in July. Kicked another in the chest. Should have been put down," another voice said. Not cruel, just practical. Caleb didn't flinch. He leaned forward, watching the horse the way others watched a brewing storm. Tense, reverent, waiting for lightning. The horse's sides heaved, a purple welt gleaming on his flank, hooves chipped, shoes rusted. Yet beneath the grime, raw power pulsed. "Lot 79, the auctioneer said, voice cautious. 5 years old, Mustang cross, not broken, owner surrenders liability, starting low." Silence. The horse let out a piercing whinny, half humming, half plea. "Come on, someone's got the grit to take him." No one moved. Then Caleb stepped forward. 200, he said, voice steady, flat. Laughter rippled through the crowd. A ranch hand spat in the dust. "Kid's got a death wish." The auctioneer hesitated. "You understand, son, this horse—" "I understand," Caleb cut in. "No other bids came. Going once, twice, sold. 200 to the boy." Murmurs erupted as the handler, cursing, handed Caleb the frayed lead rope. The horse reared, muscles coiling. But Caleb stood his ground, eyes locked with the animal's. Not aggressive, not afraid, just there. He didn't drag the horse away. He turned and walked, and when the horse bucked, Caleb waited, then took another step. Slowly, hooves followed, reluctant but moving. No trailer waited, no truck. Caleb led the horse 2 miles down a dusty road to an abandoned ranch, where tall grass swayed and sagging fences stood. He had prepared it weeks ago, a makeshift paddock of salvaged boards, a rusted trough filled with creek water, a pile of scavenged hay. He led the horse inside, closed the gate, and let go. The stallion didn't charge or bolt. He stood, sides heaving, nostrils flaring, uncertain. Caleb squatted outside the fence and watched, silent, as twilight turned gold to purple. A breeze stirred the dust. The horse paced, testing the paddock's edges, seeking escape but finding none. Caleb stayed over an hour, then rose and walked away, whispering a name, Shadow. The next morning, before dawn, he returned with a pail of oats and a torn blanket. Shadow snorted but didn't charge. Caleb set the pail down, backed off, and waited. An hour passed before Shadow approached, 2 more before he ate. Each day Caleb returned, waiting, sometimes whispering stories of a life that taught him silence was safer than sharing. His mother left at 10, his father drowned in a bottle soon after. Foster homes were cold rules and colder meals. He ran, he fought, but no one reached him. With Shadow, no explanations were needed. Both were too wild, too broken, too much for others to bother with. On the 5th day, Shadow let Caleb enter the paddock without lashing out. On the 7th, he allowed a brief touch to his shoulder. Electric, fleeting, real. Not everyone saw progress. Mr. Tulliver, the old rancher who owned the land, drove up on the 8th day, leaning on the gate, skeptical. "Think you'll fix that beast?" Caleb didn't look up, not trying to fix him. Then what? Listening, Tulliver stayed longer than he meant to, then left without a word. 2 weeks became 3. Caleb taught Shadow to take a halter, then a gentle touch along his flanks. One afternoon, Shadow let him brush a snarl from his mane without flinching. No one saw until Sheriff Wilkes arrived, tipped off by a neighbor about a boy squatting with a dangerous animal. He leaned on his cruiser, sighing. "Ought to take you in. This ain't legal." Caleb said nothing. "You're not hurting him." Caleb shook his head. "He saved me." Wilkes tilted his head. "Looks like you're saving each other." He left with a warning. No arrest. That night, thunder growled. Caleb stood under a sagging awning, watching lightning split the sky. Shadow whinnied, restless but steady. Caleb reached out, and for the first time, Shadow leaned into his touch. In that stormlit silence, something shifted, not tamed, just understood. Rain fell, wind howled, but they stood together, unshaken. The next morning, sharp and damp, Caleb arrived with a halter. Shadow's eyes followed, wary but curious. Caleb stepped into the paddock, holding the halter out, not demanding, just offering. Shadow lowered his head, not submitting, but choosing. "You want out of here, don't you?" Caleb murmured. "More than fences and strangers." He slipped the halter on, smooth, no fight. He clipped a lead rope, not to bind, but to guide. They walked the paddock, Caleb matching Shadow's pace, stopping when he stopped, turning when he turned, a quiet dance of patience. Shadow snorted at crows, shied at noises, but followed. Later, Caleb brought a worn saddle, letting Shadow sniff and paw it. When he placed it on the horse's back, Shadow tensed, but didn't buck. Caleb didn't cinch it. That was for later. Trust came first, earned breath by breath. By midday, both were spent, but stood together. Sweat on skin and hide, sharing something whole. Tulliver returned that afternoon, his truck rattling up the road. "Heard from Wilkes," he said, leaning on the gate. "Says you've made a friend." Caleb brushed Shadow's shoulder, the horse's ears forward, calm. Tulliver whistled. "Not the same devil from auction." Caleb glanced up. "Never was a devil." Tulliver spat into the dirt. "Stubborn, like someone I knew once." The redemption of Shadow. The old man, Tulliver, leaned against the warped fence of the ranch, his weathered face unreadable. "Ranch house, still got a roof," he said after a pause, voice rough as gravel. "Leaky, but better in a stall. Want the key? It's yours." Caleb, startled, met his gaze. Tulliver shrugged, a shadow of loss, or maybe hope flickering in his eyes. "Place is useless to me, maybe not to you." Without another word, he handed Caleb a bent key. That night, Caleb lit a fire in the rusted stove of the sagging ranch house. The walls reeked of mildew and time, but they held. A moth-eaten mattress on a creaking bed frame felt like a luxury after weeks on the ground. Outside, Shadow, the horse he'd bought for next to nothing at auction, grazed under the stars. Caleb slept indoors, a small victory. They settled into a rhythm. Sunrise training, midday rests, evenings brushing Shadow as twilight bled into the horizon. Shadow learned fast, his dark eyes sharp with an intelligence dulled by past cruelty but not broken. Caleb started saddle work gently, draping his weight over Shadow's back, sliding off before panic could set in. On the 5th try, Shadow stood still. "You're ready?" Caleb whispered, climbing aboard slowly. For a moment, he held his breath. Shadow trembled, but didn't bolt. Caleb leaned forward, hand on the horse's neck. "You're not a lost cause." Their first walk around the paddock was clumsy but real, a partnership born. Word spread through Tulliver's loose lips, then through men who'd witnessed the auction and couldn't believe the tales drifting back. They came, one by one, to the ranch fence. Skeptical, arms crossed, faces guarded. Some watched silently, others asked, "How'd you get him to trust you?" Caleb's answer never changed. "I listened." Mrs. Delaney, a widow with kind eyes, brought a bale of hay. "My husband always said no horse is beyond saving," she told him, glad he was right. They didn't come to help, not really. They came because something rare was unfolding. A boy with nothing and a horse with less were becoming more. But not everyone approved. On the 15th day, A glossy red pickup roared up the drive. A man in a starched shirt and 2 clean boots stepped out, sunglasses hiding his eyes. "Grant Holden," he said, smile sharp as a blade. "I represent the auction house." Caleb wiped his hands on his jeans. "Okay." Holden's grin widened. "Questions about how you got that horse? Dangerous animals come with a recall clause if mishandled. Liability, you understand." Shadow, grazing nearby, lifted his head, nostrils flaring. Caleb stepped between them. "I bought him fair. He's safe with me." Holden pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I'm authorized to reclaim him pending review. You can appeal, but—" Caleb cut in. "I'll fight it." Holden smirked. "Got a lawyer? Got the truth." The man chuckled, leaving the paper fluttering in the breeze. 3 days. That night, Caleb didn't sleep. Blanket around his shoulders, he sat by Shadow's paddock, stars wheeling above. "They think we're nothing," he whispered, hand on Shadow's shoulder, "but we're too far gone to quit." At dawn, he rode into town. Shadow still green, the road uneven, but they made it to the square by noon. Townsfolk stopped, staring. The boy with the wild horse had ridden in like a myth. Outside the sheriff's office, Sheriff Wilkes sipped coffee, eyes narrow. "Making a point?" he asked. "Need help," Caleb said. "They're trying to take him, on paper." Wilkes nodded slowly. "Auction house has money, lawyers. I've got a voice, and people who've seen." The sheriff sighed, setting down his cup. "Let's make some calls." The hearing came on a Tuesday in the county building, dust and lemon polish heavy in the air. Caleb sat at a long table, pale blue shirt too big, boots scuffed but polished. Across the aisle, Holden oozed confidence, flanked by suited attorneys. The judge, a silver-haired woman with a no-nonsense stride, scanned the docket. "Auction policy versus ownership rights. Mr. Holden, you first." Holden stood, all charm. "Your Honor, the horse was deemed dangerous, sold under a waiver this boy may not have grasped. We're protecting public safety." The judge raised an eyebrow. "He signed the waiver?" "Yes, but—" "Then he assumed liability, evidence of endangerment?" Holden faltered. "Complaints, anonymous, horse ridden through town, no reins, no helmet, no certification." The judge looked unimpressed. "Concern, not danger." Caleb stood, unprompted. "May I speak?" She nodded. "I bought Shadow fair. They wanted him dead before the auction started. I worked him daily, never forced him. He trusts me now. He doesn't bolt or buck." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Townsfolk who'd come out of curiosity or loyalty. Sheriff Wilkes stepped up. "I've seen it. So's half the town." Mrs. Delaney followed. "That horse is gentle now. Broken, but mended." One by one, others spoke. The grocer, the mechanic, even Tulliver, who tipped his hat. Boy did what men with decades in the saddle couldn't. The judge raised a hand, silencing the room. "No cause to revoke ownership. Mr. Holden, pursue civil litigation if you must. But Caleb Lane is Shadow's rightful owner." Applause broke, soft then swelling. Caleb's hands shook as he sat, heart pounding. Holden gathered his papers, lips tight, and left. Outside, morning haze softened the sky. Sheriff Wilkes clapped Caleb's shoulder. "Did good, kid." "We did," Caleb said, looking at the small crowd. People who'd stood up when it mattered. Community. A word he hadn't tasted in years. That afternoon, Caleb rode Shadow through town, not for show, but to breathe. Shadow moved smoothly, ears flicking, hooves light. The reins were loose, the bond unseen but ironclad. At the outskirts, Caleb dismounted, letting Shadow graze while he leaned against a fence post, hills rolling in the distance. That night, Tolliver appeared with a gift, a hand-tooled leather saddle, worn but cherished. "Found it in the barn, my brother's," he said, setting it down. "Shadow might wear it better than dust." Caleb touched the leather. "Thank you." Tolliver paused. "Folks are asking if you'd take another horse, one from the west pasture." Caleb looked at Shadow, grazing under the star-dusted sky, and nodded. The storm was just beginning. A whisper of hope. Winter draped the hills in frost, turning mornings crisp and quiet. Breath curled like smoke in the cold, and the horses' coats thickened against the chill. Caleb rose before dawn, boots crunching on frozen gravel as he hauled feed across the ranch. The place had grown busier. 3 new horses in 2 months, each carrying deeper wounds than the last. Caleb never rushed them. He'd learned progress came softly, like a whisper, not a shout. Shadow, the black stallion, was his anchor. Once a snarling ghost in an auction pen, he'd become a county legend. Tourists peered through the fence, hoping to glimpse the wild horse tamed. But Shadow was no spectacle. He was calm, watchful, trailing Caleb like a faithful shadow should. One bitter afternoon, snow teasing the horizon, a knock echoed on the porch. Caleb opened the door, expecting a neighbor, but found a stranger. Tall, in a worn canvas coat, hat dusted with snow. His face, weathered like old bark, held eyes sharp with a private war. "You Caleb Lane?" he asked. Caleb nodded. "Can I help you?" "Name's Hank Rowley, drove from Montana. Heard you work with lost ones." He glanced at his truck. "Got a horse, not mine, my brother's. He died 3 months ago. That horse hasn't let anyone near since." "What's his story?" Caleb stepped into the cold, neck prickling. "Mustang. Trained for avalanche rescue, hard terrain. My brother trusted him more than people. He's like a thunderstorm waiting to happen." Rowley hesitated. "His name's Justice." In the trailer, a dark bay trembled, eyes white-rimmed, body coiled. Caleb felt a radiating tension like Shadow's once was, a soul caged in fear. "Bring him in," he said softly. It took 2 hours to coax Justice out, no ropes, just Caleb's steady presence. Rowley watched, arms crossed, as the stallion settled in a back paddock. "He's not safe," Rowley warned. Caleb nodded. Neither was Shadow. Rowley stayed 3 days, observing silently. On the 4th, he left a note. "He doesn't trust the world." "I didn't either. Maybe you can teach him, quiet-like." Caleb tucked it in his pocket. Justice was a storm, whirling at sounds, lashing at shadows, refusing food unless alone. Caleb spoke his language: patience, silence, presence. He sat by the fence, reading aloud or muttering. Weeks passed, snow fell, then melted. Justice began to watch. In late January, Caleb slipped on ice near the trough, bucket clanging. Justice reared, bolted, then stopped. Slowly he returned, sniffing the bucket, then Caleb's sleeve. "You're not so different," Caleb murmured. "Just need someone to stay." Something shifted. Justice stopped flinching at halters, followed Caleb, let him brush burrs from his mane. By mid-February, in the round pen, with a rope draped like a scarf, Justice circled, then stopped at Caleb's side. The ranch buzzed. A mare with a shattered past arrived, then a neglected gelding from the county shelter. Caleb took them all. Saying no felt like betrayal. Supplies poured in, hay, brushes, lumber for the barn roof. The place changed, not neatly, but with slow magic. One night, wind clawing the rafters, Caleb watched Justice sleep standing, ears flicking. "You don't have to be afraid forever," he said. The horse's quiet exhale felt like agreement. In March, a letter arrived with a black and white photo, a ranger astride a young Justice, mountains behind. On the back, "He carried my brother home when no one else could. Keep him free." Caleb framed it near Shadow's stall. Spring brought color, wildflowers, croaking frogs, returning birds. Justice ran, not in fear but joy, chasing the wind, whinnying like the land was his. A girl, maybe 12, with dark hair and a cane, came with her father. She hadn't spoken since an accident. She moved along the paddock, horses nuzzling her hand. Justice froze, then inched forward, lowering his head. She touched his nose and smiled. "Her first in 6 months," her father said. That night, stars bright, Caleb sat on the porch with Shadow, a blanket over his knees. The world felt still. He thought of the horses, the people, how pain arrived heavy and left lighter. Healing came not with force, but time. Justice neighed, a wild call into the dark. Caleb smiled. It sounded like hope.